Welcome to this 6-part series that is brought to you by the European Union's Knowledge Hub on the prevention of radicalisation, Europe's flagship programme for learning the best practices across countries with the goal of deepening understanding and improving policy. Part of the mission of the Hub is to make sure that knowledge is shared with the wider public, helping inform understanding of the key debates on how to tackle violent extremism. I'm Drew Mikhail, a scholar and practitioner working across violence, peace and policy in the Middle East, East Africa and Europe. And across this series, I'll be in conversation with frontline experts, practitioners and in many cases former extremists, who now lead the way in the understanding of how radicalisation takes root and how to stop it. Today, we begin this series with perhaps the most contested and emotive aspect of violent extremism.
You know where it's going to be? London or somewhere local?
You need to sit down, Jamie. If you don't sit down,
Does that mean you don't know? Does that mean you don't know what you just want to tell me?
Nothing's been decided yet. You need to sit down.
I don't want to sit down.
If you don't sit down, I have to stop this discussion.
Maybe I want you to.
Do you?
It'd piss you off, that, wouldn't it? You'd have to go home and then come back again.
Jamie, if you do not sit...
Look, I fucking want to sit down! You do not tell me when to sit down! You do not control what I fucking... Look at me now! You do not control what I do in my life. Get that in that fucking little head of yours. Fucking hell.
The clip you just heard was from the Netflix series Adolescence, which caught global attention for its raw depiction of a teenage boy who commits a brutal act of violence after falling into a deep rabbit hole of online extremism. The show triggered a wave of public debate, and in today's episode, Too Young to Be a Threat, we explore violent extremism of minors and bring you 3 unique and insightful voices who work every day to prevent it.
Being radical per se is not illegal. You have the suffragette movement was very radical. The gay rights movement was radical. And we've benefited from both of these movements, and there are so many more out there. So being radical is not bad. It's not illegal. It's when I then turn to the extremist or the terrorist views.
That was the voice of Nikolaus Grauszer, one of the key figures behind Austria's national approach to preventing violent extremism, and head of the International Strategic Prevention Unit within the Ministry of Interior. He helped build the architecture for Austria's PCVE strategy, and he was keen in our conversation to underline that policy should always deal with minors sensitively.
It's hard because when we talk about minors, we're not only talking about prevention, but we're also talking about protection. And I think the line is extremely thin when it comes to all the sides that are involved. You know, as a policymaker, I know that we need the systems that can identify risks early, whether it's in schools, online, or in families, or wherever. But as a parent, I also know how easily that can feel intrusive or even stigmatizing.
For the young person.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. You know, a teenager who's, angry and rebellious, and they are, or exploring identity, whether it's online or offline, shouldn't automatically be seen as a risk or a security risk, right? That tension, so like between safeguarding and labeling, I think it's the hardest part of policymaking in this field. I'm guessing because it just is, when dealing with young people, the focus has been on education, resilience, psychosocial support, but not repression. Or it has to be on that. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But translating that into practice, that requires trust. And that's often not there into the higher institutions. But it also needs a trust between schools, social workers, the police, families, and then obviously the government institutions as well. And that trust on so many different levels is fragile.
Nick, both as a policymaker but also a father, was keen to underline that in any prevention work with minors, the focus, unlike adults, must always shift to building a system of trust with those young people. Each of this week's guests were very keen to point out that young people are, without a doubt, more vulnerable. And no one said this better than Cathrine Moestue, who as a clinical psychologist helps individuals build the needed resilience to exit harmful belief systems. Crucially, Cathrine has personally experienced herself how coercive belief systems work, when as a 19-year-old she was indoctrinated into a cult. And when we talked, she reflected, through her own view, why prevention of extremism is so difficult to achieve.
If I'm young, I'm insecure by default, right? And so the more insecure I am, the more I will look outside myself for answers. I will look to authorities, and I don't mean necessarily authority experts, but people that I look up to authority. That's one route that I will take. But another route that I will take is social proof. I will look to my friends or my peers. We actually don't look inside ourselves for answers. We look outside. And so if I'm online and I feel insecure and I don't know how to regulate my fear and I've not learned and I'm surrounded by deception, because let's face it, the belonging they get or the hero status that they might get is fake, right? It's not real. I mean, it's not sustainable. And so when I'm in that environment, I will look to other people, and if they are
macho or whatever it happens to be,
they become my role model. Mm-hmm. And this way, we all make decisions this way. Even if I'm now rich, living in a mansion or being a boss of a company, if I'm going to buy a new car, I look at what cars my neighbors are driving, what is recommended from the boss of my boss. You know, we are human beings. We are social animals. So we look outside ourselves for answers.
Cathrine's view is validated by Eva Jiménez González, the lead at the Institute of Forensic Psychology at Spain's Ministry of Justice, and whose very job is to work directly with youth flagged as radicalisation risks. She explained to me how malevolent groomers, as she described, are effective at pulling young people into their web.
Groomers, as we call it, the people who are really looking for these vulnerable young people, because they are very good psychologists, by the way. They are searching for your weaknesses, and if they found where your bounds are, they will hit you right there. They will propose you. I can understand you. You really feel like me. This is another important issue. Young people are mostly driving, and they are seeking for immediate response.
I asked all the guests this week the same question. How can we prevent minors from falling into different types of extremism? Particularly in today's world where access to different sources of information is prevalent. Eva and I discussed this, and the role of ideologies.
Because they are mainly focusing ideology. I normally say, especially working with young people, has to be everything about their feelings, their emotion, and their reaction. Especially young people, adolescents, they're a bit selfish. So everything is about their life, about their reality. I mean, their psychological considers psychology as perception, cognition, and emotion, closely linked to ideology, abstract narrative, of course. But I normally say, if you wanted to connect with them, you cannot just consider you are left or right, far-wing, extremist, narrative, etc. It's something about how you are reacting to those narratives. What kind of feeling provide you this narrative? Because this is the best way to be with them, to be part of their society, community, peer, etc. As well with adults. But if we are just focusing in young people, adolescents, and minors, this is the key. Must be that approach.
I like to describe ideology as the package, the wrapping in which the real allure of extremism is held. The ideology is the pretty paper around, and basically...
But the context is inside.
Exactly. So to get to the context inside, you have to unwrap the paper.
Yeah. It's like an onion. You have to take up so many different parts of the onion. If we analyze the main cases that we have right now, FTF, lone actors, for interior fighters, lone actors, incels, this misogynist community on subculture, they are totally lost. They are suffering for isolation, the feeling that they should be considered victim because they have been marginalized from society. We are speaking about the external connection in between them because they really consider only in between us we can be heard. So this is about feelings and reactions. It is populated by different ideology for hearing this. But as you say, it's just the cover page of a book, and we have to open the book and read what is in the interior.
Opening the book and looking past the veneer of ideology is a key to getting to the heart of the issue. Nick Grauszer.
Take an example of a young person says something extreme online, posts something extreme online. I think suddenly it becomes almost a police issue, instead of a moment to ask, okay, what's really going on? For example, I think studies show that most individuals, especially minors, they're not drawn by ideology first, especially today, in today's world. They're drawn, by emotions, belonging, identity, disillusionment, lack of options, and or frustration. So the ideology, I think it comes later. It gives them, often it's like a way to give meaning to those feelings, or as an explanation to, I now belong to a group that understands me or sees things exactly the way I see it. Which brings me to, if a young person feels heard, you can guide them. If they feel labeled, you've lost them. And that's usually where the intentions turn into setbacks.
In discussing pathways to extremism, it is beneficial to take a moment to hear from my conversation with Cathrine, who reflected on climates of fear, along with the lack of emotional literacy, as Nick put it earlier, to develop resilience against extremism.
I also get frightened when I read about violence and I read about, oh my God, people are being radicalized more now. It's not less, it's more. And they're radicalized online and they're younger and younger. Of course, I get scared. And in that state of mind, I'm not a good thinker. I have a need to become safe again. And so if we look at what we need, all adults and society, we need more safety, we need more reports, we need more meetings, but we forget what does the kids need, so in this state of fear, I'm reactive, I'm not proactive. So it's impossible for me to be curious. And so I really understand it because in the cult, the cult leader was fear-mongering all the time. So this whole discussion on radicalization it really reminds me because I notice I get frightened, and then I can't find a solution. And I think so really learning that we react to these threats, but we have to take a step back and really calm down and ask ourselves, what do we want to accomplish here? Will more meetings, more reports give us what we want to accomplish? Probably not.
I noticed when you're speaking there that you reached and you self-soothed in a way, right? And this is someone, I've gone through therapy and I understand some of the embodiment techniques about like feeling my tension. And oftentimes we talk about critical thinking as a vanguard, but really it seems to be that emotional understanding of yourself when you are triggered. We began this part of the conversation by saying your awareness of fear and you feel it. And these are kinds of skills that not everyone has. And particularly young people who are dealing with puberty, dealing with education in school, which is difficult enough. All these different contentions are particularly difficult for young people. Is it a way that we can help create better environments, considering that I also think that you mentioned that there's more radicalization, there's more vectors now for radicalization. How do we create that sort of self-awareness and understanding that young people can take a step back and say, this is not a moment for me, I'm not dealing with this?
Such a good question, I think. And it's sort of, in your question, is sort of a little bit of the solution as well. I think this is what I've learned myself in my personal journey, is that this is what I didn't know how to do. I start to cry when I think about it because I didn't have a script didn't have tools to self-regulate my emotions, so it was easy to make me frightened, and then I was reactive, and that's one of the ways that I said yes when I should have said no. If I had learned as a kid to really listen to my gut feeling and to sit with my pain, and that I had a parent who could normalize, oh, I can see you're angry now, Cathrine. When you are angry, you need to really set a boundary. I can see when you're scared, you need some safety. If you're crying, you need some comfort. To understand the language of our emotions is really to understand ourselves and to understand our humanity. And if I had, let's say that I knew how to do that at 19, my story would not have happened. And so I would love to see our society teach our kids the language of their emotions, of their humanity, because I know that I'm like them in this sense. And this is what we all need to learn as adults, meeting the problem of the radicalization. So the problem is not the problem.
Couldn't have put it better myself. I was going to ask something quite controversial in the fact that, is there a real difference between radicalization of a minor versus radicalization of an adult, considering that we are bringing it back to self-understanding and understanding that it's not a problem, we're viewing it as a problem, but because we're viewing it as something that happens to someone else.
Exactly.
Not something that I am deeply, potentially able to succumb to.
Cathrine's powerful recollections speak to the very heart of what is currently understood about pathways to extremism. And in my conversation with Eva, we discussed how effective adolescence was at showing how intergenerational communication failures need to be addressed to prevent violence.
Okay, from different ways. First, using a very emotional strategy communication. We don't want to judge them. We only want you to approach and say, okay, we respect your idea, we respect your timing, we respect whatever you want to do in your life, but okay, let's do something together. Let's try to help you in the way that you consider necessary. Second, through different figures and models. So we cannot pretend that public institutions trace the pathway to connect with them. So it's between different models and figures, the people who are following with, they're catching, etc. And third, being very patient with them. Because sometimes they consider us, other people, as the enemy. So it's, you wanted to change me, but I'm not going to allow you to do that. So we have to be very flexible with them. That's because I told you, for me, it's quite easier to work with other people because, okay, this is the timing, this is the planning for my day, we will do it. But with young people, you cannot have an agenda and a program, a fixed program, because it's everything about them, as I mentioned before. The reality is totally different. So be patient and flexible with them. And of course, consider the ideas. They have many proposals. We should train educators. We cannot forget that the school at the first line detectors, and maybe they can create hub as well. So training those people who are daily connected with youth, they will even provide with so many different insights. So we have it's kind of melting pot of different actors and agency, but we sometimes we are quite selfish and we recognize I have the whole information. I don't need you. This is not the case. So we are guiding them, but they have to be the main characters, the main actors and actresses.
Eva outlined a holistic, collaborative approach with young people as the key for effective prevention. But how realistic is it, considering the number of actors and coordination? How do we create policy that helps young people grow in a safe environment, respecting their needs to push against conformity, but still ward against extremism? I put those questions to Nick.
I guess the main challenge is that everything, that our entire security and justice architecture, it was built around adults, right? So for people who are legally responsible and to a certain extent psychologically mature, right? But minors, I think, not just think, I know they live in a completely different reality at those stages in their life. Their identities are still forming, their sense of belonging is fragile, and the emotions are far more volatile. If you apply an adult crime prevention lens, risk assessment, sanctions, deterrence to that context, it often backfires. I think I really would do a genuine whole society approach. I mean that literally. We say it so often, holistic, whole society approach, but prevention can't just sit, with one authority or a few ministries or a couple of NGOs or CSOs, right? So I think that would be the one thing. It starts with the families, the relatives, peers, teachers, youth workers, and moves up to, the local mayor. Everybody would need to be involved all the way up to the very top, all the way to a supranational level. That's what I see as a holistic approach really means. Every layer has a role, and prevention only works if and when they all reinforce each other.
Taking Nick's point to build a holistic approach, I put it to Eva, as a person who works between state institutions and frontline practitioners, what should we do to bring stakeholders together?
I need to make understand the practitioner that the enemy is not on the other side. So even if they are not receiving sometimes the budget, if they don't feel as we are not understanding in our needs when we are working with that people because we are trying to teach them, the security side is just to control them and to protect them, but from the security society. So I try to, have so many balls in my hands, try to fly all together without leaving fail any of them. So I try to understand the practitioner. They can be understandable as well. And sharing the information with the policymakers, because even if they are eager to receive the information, I have to interpret that information. There's some specific codex that they cannot learn about because they are not in that particular scenario. So it's very important to translate the insight and input that we are receiving from first-line practitioners into the languages, protocol, administrative and bureaucratic, boring issues. We have to just to share that information with the policymakers, actors.
When we opened this episode, we heard the voice of a teenager spiraling, crossing the line between internal turmoil and real-world violence. But when I talked to Eva, she reminded me how badly we get it wrong when we treat rebellion as a threat. When we forget that growing up is a negotiation with limits, with emotions, and with pain. Then Nick, as a policymaker outlining the key role that he has is to build trust between young people and the systems that are supposed to protect them. And then came Cathrine. Her honesty and her vulnerability as a person who has experienced it all underlined that moving towards extremist thinking is not rare. It's not alien, but it's often a consequence of unmet needs. And if that's true, it means the solutions are within reach. So let's give her the final word.
Yeah, it's being together. It's the hope is again just a connection. It's meeting those real needs. I feel connected with people who want to create a society where it's safe and where emotions are normalized and that we can see our common humanity and just, connection. And that gives me meaning. And it also gives me a role, my identity, that I'm here with you talking. So I think those are the three answers to that.
Thank you for listening to the EU Knowledge Hub on the Prevention of Radicalisation podcast episode 1, Too Young to Be a Threat. You can dive deeper into this topic through the full conversations I had with Eva, Nick and Cathrine, available in our show notes. You can also explore more about the Hub's work, including resources, reports and upcoming activities through our online welcome package. You'll also find that in the notes. Next time, we talk about strategic communications and explore how policymakers can communicate proactively in a complex information environment. We look at how disinformation spreads, how extremist actors exploit grievances and emotions, and how credible alternative narratives can strengthen resilience. Join us then for episode 2.